welcome to the Delphi Economic Forum. I'm Doulgeri, I'm a journalist, and today I will be discussing misinformation and the media with our guests here in Delphi. I will start by presenting them. We have Peter Kellner. He's a journalist, a political commentator, and former president of the YouGov opinion polling organization in the United Kingdom. Welcome. We have Eugenia Bozou, Government Affairs and Public Policy Manager at Google Greece. She's a very experienced communications professional. We also have with us Giacomo Lev-Mannheimer, Head of Government Affairs and Public Policy of TikTok in Southern Europe, and Vangelis Papakonstantinou, who is a professor on personal data protection law at the Faculty of Law and Criminology of the Free University of Brussels, and the DPO, the Data Protection Officer of New Democracy, the governing party. I would like to welcome you all and thank you for being here with us today. We're going to discuss misinformation and the media, and since the internet has dominated our lives, let's start this discussion with misinformation online and through the social media. And before going to you, Peter, let me just say that according to a new study that I read recently, a study of MIT, people's impulses to share news on social media fuels misinformation because people's desire to share news content on social media can hinder their ability to judge it accurately. Peter, misinformation, false propaganda, fake news, is these things new?
Good afternoon, everybody. No, it's not new. You can go back to all the conspiracy stories about the death of President Kennedy 60 years ago this year, or the protocols of the Elders of Zion more than a century ago. And indeed, I came across a quote from rather earlier, somebody who was a meticulous observer of truth, and he wrote, "Most people will not take the trouble to find out the truth. They're much more inclined to accept the first story they hear." Any guess, Craig, who that was? Thucydides, 2,500 years ago. He wrote a lot about the Peloponnesian Wars, and he was terrified by what we now call fake news. So is this new? Absolutely not. What I think has changed is the ability to pollute the public square with fake news. Now, there's a couple of recent, rather encouraging examples, oddly enough. Last week, Fox News had to pay out almost $800 million to Dominion, the polling, the election equipment company. A year or two ago, a man called Alex Jones, a terrible radio right-wing conspiracist, and he did this most appalling thing about the murders of children at the school Sandy Hook, and he said it was a hoax perpetrated by the parents. They went after him, they went to law, he was fined, he is now bankrupt. So what's common about Fox News and Alex Jones? They were identifiable. The victims of their fake news had a remedy. They could go to law. My worry is that so much of fake news comes anonymously, either completely anonymously or it's very hard to find out who's behind it. And I think what we need two things. We need a system of deterring fake news in the first place, and we need a system of redress for when it does get out there. And that means tackling the way social media operates. It means tackling the issues of anonymity. Now, it strikes me that it's possible for authoritarian regimes to block on social media stories about the persecution of the Uyghurs in China or criticize President Putin. It ought to be possible to block Holocaust denial. It ought to be possible to block stories that Hillary Clinton was running a paedophile ring from a pizza bar in Washington. These things somehow seem to get through. So I would like to see And I don't know if we can, in the next 24 and a half minutes, see if we can get to some agreement on what the responsibility of the social media are as publishers and what the rules should be in cracking anonymity where people try to put plainly false news out there.
So it's not something new. Eugenia, in Google, your tools like, for example, the search engine, how do these tools tackle misinformation and false news?
Yes, let me just jump into a quick comment because it's also
Sure.
more interesting to do a conversation, because yesterday I was visiting the ancient site and there were all sorts of stories of what exactly, what's going on there. And the mysteries and everything. And I asked the guy, okay, how do we know these stories were true? How do we know that these things were happening and not something similar or something else? And what she shared is that most of the things we know today about the ancient monument is from priests who, fled or, resigned and then came to write about it and share stories. But many of them were not true. So for years, they believed things like, what was going on if the Pythia was one. So for many years, everyone believed that the Pythia was one woman who lived all these hundreds of years. Instead, of course, there were, villagers, women from the village who did that as a profession. Mm-hmm. So yes, I agree, it's ancient. And what's also very, let's say, almost terrifying is that, and according to research we did in Google, is that people tend to believe the fake news, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. But what is extraordinary is that even when we are shown the truth and the arguments that bring down mm-hmm. what is fake or the disinformation, the fake news tend to stick, mm-hmm. especially when they are viral or when they are in repetition. So
the first impression is very
it's about how our brain works, and this is why it's so hard to basically fight it, because, okay, one thing is technology, one thing is how we operate, but the other thing is how our brain works. And this is why Google at the moment is also focusing, and I think we will have the opportunity to talk about it more in a large-scale debunking experiment, where we basically use a method like the vaccine mm-hmm. to slowly train people's brain to recognize and not believe fake news. Now, when it comes to our products, mm-hmm. You can see it's a large-scale operation, I would say, with many resources, with thousands of people working dedicated on these things, with funds on fact-checking, mm-hmm. with a hub created in Dublin dedicated on exactly this issue. When you search something, you can now see the sources, and you can deep dive and see exactly where this news you are reading or where this piece of information is coming from. And before coming here, I just checked our fact-checking mechanism to see what is the latest fake news that mm-hmm. we found. It was about Joe Biden saying that climate change is a non-issue. That was the latest, just 5 minutes before I came here, just to share with you. So we do have the tools, and if people are trained, and we invest a lot in training at the moment, there are ways to track fake news, to recognize fake news, to report fake news, and I would say that it is a collective effort that needs to be done. It's not just Google or TikTok or academia mm-hmm. or the publishers. We need to work in partnership.
Giacomo, TikTok has 1.6 billion active users, from as I read. How do you? So the influence is huge, is immense of this social platform. What is your approach to misinformation and fake news?
Yeah, so of course, first, thank you very much. And I mean, we are, let's say, a bit, the youngest kid in the block. TikTok has 7 years of life. And of course, in a way, we had such a fast growth that makes it, quite challenging to actually keep at that pace also when it comes to, build those infrastructures, those practices to protect the platform and the users. But on the other hand, we can also count, on actually the experience of companies like Google, which, have done tremendous work in the last 20 years or so in building, great solutions to address these challenges. And so I think the first answer is really, and I really want to repeat that, I also think, it really comes, down to collaborating and working together. I strongly believe, that an industry approach first and then a collaboration between the industry and, regulators and academia is really the only way we can really, address these kind of challenges. So now, of course, like we are a user-generated platform. This means, anybody can upload content, videos for when it comes to TikTok. And any video that goes on the platform gets moderated. So there is an AI system that checks, if there is something, wrong about a content that gets uploaded, and then we have regular checks of human moderators who check content again. And of course, we do the same and apply community guidelines as well to, fake news and misinformative content. But now the point is, I mean, of course, we do our best, and this is by far our largest investment in our budget is dedicated to those things and to safety. And of course, we also have reporting systems on the platform that makes it easy for people to report content that is inaccurate or false. We also have fact-checking programs. We work with AFP in Greece, for example, in order to, let expert people also judge on content that we don't feel we are, completely comfortable in assessing. But, that being said, and I really, don't misunderstand me, I mean, of course, platforms play a big role. As you said, we have a tremendous responsibility. We take it very seriously. But that being said, I don't think that technology alone will be able to solve anything. Because at the end of the day, it's about the two parties. There is us on the one side, and there is people using our products on the other side. And we also need to, focus on those people. And I agree, that Google is now, for what I also had learned in the past months, focusing on this idea of going not so much in addressing the specific issue, the specific piece of fake news, of disinformation, but more focusing on what are the mechanisms that, make our minds so easily infected by misinformation. So we have done a campaign on our platform last year that was called Fact Check Your Feed. And it was all about really making our creators speak directly to our community to explain them what are those characteristics that more or less are the same in all the kind of fake news, regardless of the topic, being it, health or war or politics or whatever. Because at the end of the day, there are some patterns that are repetitive. So we really want to investigate what those patterns are and educate our users in, in understanding that these patterns exist when they read something and reflect about the existence of this pattern. Now, again, this is not enough, but I think, this is a bit our approach in few words.
Eugenia said before that despite the efforts, fake news have the tendency to stick in our minds. So, Peter, do you think that nowadays people use exclusively the internet to form an opinion and think less?
Short answer is yes. Some of you who are as old as I am may remember the Simon and Garfunkel song, The Boxer. Mm-hmm. The line near the beginning, all lies and jest. A man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. And I think one of the problems, because of my age, I grew up in this rather wonderful post-war era when there were very few television channels in the major countries, and we all watched broadly the same news, and the story about what was going on in our society was much the same. Today, with the proliferation of news, it means that people can choose their source of information, be it Fox News or MSNBC or this social media or that social media. So there's been this splintering of news, and I think one of the problems is that people increasingly live in their own narrow world, their narrow understanding of what's going on.
Like creating bubbles.
Yeah,
you
there's,
mean?
and there's a great saying, the opposite of truth is not just lies, the opposite of truth is chaos. And I think we are approaching a quite chaotic period in our democracy where we can't really have often a rational discussion around an agreed body of facts. So yes, I think it's a huge problem.
Vangelis, cybercrime is one of the biggest concerns globally, with fake news ranking highest among such risks. According to a new report from Lloyd's Register Foundation, how does this work?
Thank you for the question and thank you for, for the invitation. But actually, I'm in big trouble being here because I accepted to be in a panel of which subject matter I do not believe in. So personally, I do not believe there is misinformation.
Okay.
And I do not believe there is fake news. And let me please explain after this declaration. People lie. This is who we are. This is, in a way, because also we have imagination, what separates us from animals. We lie. And this is what we do. Customarily we lie. Each one of us lies every day of our lives. There are white lies, small lies, bigger lies. And this is human at the end of the day. So my first point is that lying is human. Second point is that, this is very much in accordance with that Giacomo and Peter said about being in a bubble, that people want to be lied to. We are part of the mechanism of lying. Because we lie, we understand that others will lie too, and we choose to believe in the lie, most of the times.
Okay, but lying, you misinform people, right?
So
it's the same.
Both these things are human, and people who believe in the two examples given by my co-speakers about Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, they choose to believe the pizza, basement lie or the no climate problem lie. It is a specific group of people that chooses to believe the lie, and lying is being done to, usually, to different types of people. So, at the end of the day, because, and my point here to your question about criminalization, and this is a bigger discussion about human rights and whether we should criminalize misinformation and whether we should introduce mechanisms that monitor speech.
May I say, I agree with a lot of what you say, but doesn't that mean that whether journalists like I was, or Google or TikTok, the intermediate forces, don't we have an even greater responsibility precisely for that reason?
So, exactly. So, the message is there, has always been there since man appeared on earth. We lie, and we are lied to. What changes the medium?
Yes.
What we had in city-states in Greece, and I'll come back to the example from Thukydides and Alcibiades, the first ever recorded propaganda incident. There was lying, there was propaganda, but this was in a small community of ancient Athens was 10,000 citizens or something. Now, through Google and TikTok and Facebook, which is not represented here, but it's the other obvious speaker in this discussion, the message is propagated to the millions, and this is something accessible by law. This is true. This is true. But still, it is a very thin distinction to make, a very difficult one to make by the regulator, where free speech ends and where the medium and the propagation of the message is so tense and so dangerous to democracies, because democracies have to be protected, they cannot be open gardens, that we need regulation, we need to put an end to that. But it's a very thin distinction.
So I think we can agree that lying or misinformation has become so serious nowadays that sometimes there are political consequences because of that. Fake news has been at the heart of some of the most important events globally, such as the US presidential elections, Brexit, or Russian-Ukrainian conflicts. For example, Peters, a few months ago, you wrote in an article that it wasn't Boris Johnson who had the job done in Brexit, but we all know that Boris Johnson wanted this to be his legacy. This is what he wanted to leave behind. Do you think that fake news affected Brexit? Do you think such an important event as the exit of the United Kingdom from the European Union was influenced by fake news?
Yes, and there's a rather terrible moral to this story. At the heart of the Brexit campaign, the campaign for Britain to leave the European Union, a single bus, possibly for just a single day, had painted on its side, leave the EU and with £350 million a week more for the National Health Service. But that image dominated the remainder of the campaign. And why it was a terrible moral, it was incredibly effective. It was effective not because it was true, or indeed that it was false, but that people saw it, people attacked it, and when they attacked it, that image was shown again. And what our research shows is a lot of people thought 350 million, that may be wrong, but there'll be a lot of money. And so it's achieved its objective, and the people behind it were delighted whenever it was attacked. Now, just recently, just a week or two ago, the Labour Party put out posters, or at least, one image, one social media image, wasn't it a poster, didn't even pay for it, basically saying Rishi Sunak, the British Prime Minister, didn't want to lock up racists. I mean, a plain lie, a terrible thing. And it was attacked. And the Labour Party loved the way it was attacked for the same reason that the Brexiteer loved the bus being attacked. Every time it was attacked, it got more and more exposure. And what do some people, or a lot of people come away saying, well, I'm sure Rishi Sunak isn't that bad, but hey, they're not doing very well on locking up racists. So, and I'm sure in other countries one could repeat the story. Sometimes you can lie and achieve the effect you want, even though you know you're lying, even though others know you're lying, but the lie gets the story you want out there. And I think that's awful, and I don't know where we go. I think we're going further and further downhill, and it terrifies me.
Eugenia, in the Ukrainian crisis, Google launched last year a pre-bunking campaign in Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia, focusing on false claims about Ukrainian refugees causing a housing crisis in these countries. What happened there, and what is exactly this pre-bunking technique that you used?
Yes, let me just take it a step back, because these refugees went to Poland, to Czechia, to Hungary to find hope, to find shelter and feel safe. And, the society, basically the people opened their houses and were welcoming refugees in the beginning, right? What soon came after was three basic stories that were fake. One was that the refugees were responsible for the housing problems in those countries. Two, that the refugees were responsible for health issues. And three, that the refugees were responsible for, the rise of criminality, etc. So, what we did, and what was this debunking, as we say, method, was that we created three videos tackling these particular three stories, these fake stories, that with very simple arguments, and by introducing the fake arguments to the public, we managed to showcase that these arguments were false. But the idea is that instead of waiting the fake news to go out there, you start seeding the idea, the fake news idea, with a very, very, let's say, weak argument. So it really falls, and it's very easy for the people to understand that it is fake. So this was viewed by 38 million people. Okay. Now, the results, because this is also important. First of all, it was very different from country to country. It was very, for example, in Slovakia, where the content was not in their language, but they experienced, they consumed the content in translation, with subtitles. It was far worse, because they didn't hear the stories in their own language. Most of them didn't even complete watching the video. So we only saw something like 2.5% of success of people, changing their belief. In other countries like Hungary, I think it was quite successful. It was above 10% the change. And this is not new either. I mean, this is all based in 60s, experiments. But now we are planning to launch a new one in Germany and in India. in a larger scale.
About?
It will be the same
topic.
the same topics. Yes,
Okay.
refugee crisis.
Refugee crisis.
A lot of it.
Giacomo, TikTok recently.
One
yes,
last,
of course.
last comment, because I don't even know if I will
Yes,
have time
this
to
exactly what I
come
saw.
back. And I wish we had more time, because it's also going to philosophical
Me too.
Discussions. Is that, you know, it's not, democracy is not, it is an idea and it's a value, but it's also, you know, we're talking about people's lives, we're talking about, or, you know, biases that are out there. It really, they may be, you know, online, they may be on social media, but they really harm people's lives, and they have an impact, a physical impact. There are people who are experiencing online bullying with the same levels of pain, you know, as a physical pain. This is why it's very important, you know, the partnerships we are creating, the education we do, and I'm very happy because in Greece we are enriching one of our programs, which is make safer internet online, with media literacy and fake news education for young, for children.
For children. Giacomo, TikTok recently offered workshops here in Greece about the rules for political advertising and propaganda ahead of the Greek elections. Just recently, the Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis and the leader of the opposition, Alexis Tsipras, they set up TikTok accounts. Which are the limitations of TikTok?
Yeah, so I mean, in general, like TikTok wasn't born to be a political platform at all, I would say. But then, of course, you know, it expanded to a level where clearly, you know, still politicians come to the platform because they hope to find their audiences that they wouldn't catch probably elsewhere. Probably they are right in this. But you know, we have our platform is a bit different in its mechanism from other platforms, and we are pretty new. So we think, you know, it's our responsibility, given, you know, how many users we have, to go out there and speak directly with politicians, explaining them, you know, how it works. We don't necessarily want them to join the platform, so we are glad that they use it and find it interesting, but we don't promote it, let's say. But what we do is we really try to educate also candidates about, you know, our policies, which may be stricter than other platforms. For example, we don't accept political advertising at all. So you can come on the platform, as you know, those politicians do, and just, you know, you upload your videos, and those videos, you know, get viewed by the people who like them, but you cannot pay for that. You know, you cannot even pay creators to support you. And we do that because, you know, we have seen in the past some of the worst effects, you know, of paid political propaganda on online platforms, and we don't want that to be repeated on TikTok. So even if it could be, in theory, a very good business opportunity, we think that it's better for the safety of our community and for their engagement to avoid this kind of political propaganda.
And since we have very little time, Vangelis, just one comment, very short comment. Is the EU taking action against people lying? Misinformation, I mean.
The EU, yes, it does take action, and it is a good question, but I'm not going to reply to that question. I'm going to use the minute that I have now to reverse the question. And because the EU, I could use the minute to discuss about the European Media Freedom Act, the AI Act, the DSA, the DMA, the normal stuff. But my question to you and to everybody, members of the panel, does the EU have the right to do that? Or should states do that for their own citizens? What is the role of the EU? And it's a happy coincidence that Peter is here with us, you know, benefiting from Brexit and or not. So is it the EU's job to regulate the platforms, misinformation, the internet, or is it an internal democracy thing that Greece, Italy, the UK in the past should do for itself, the government for its own citizens? Is it something for Brussels to do or for the member states?
What do you think?
Because what Brussels does is using the internal market legal basis. So it intervenes only to protect the internal market. But this is not an internal market. This is a trick. This is legalistic. This is a trick. It's a democracy thing. It is a state or no state for the EU. So, no, I'm open to...
Can I take a second? And let us say there's another European institution, the Council of Europe, They're responsible for the European Convention on Human Rights. Britain is still in that. It seems to me there is a human rights dimension to this, both about the freedom to obtain information and the responsibility for people to be given accurate information. So I think there may be, there should be an EU involvement, there should be a Council of Europe involvement, and there should be a national involvement. They're not alternatives. They should all be addressing this, in my view.
There's a lot more to discuss, but we don't have any more time.
We
So
have a
thank
different
you.
view, you know.
So I'm so sorry we don't have any
But
more
you know,
time.
as a company who has the priority to, you know, organize the world's information and make it accessible to everyone, it's our primary, you know, if I could say, number one priority to have accurate information on our platform. And of
Thank
course, Google
you.
is not the internet, but we still strive.
Thank you all very much for this discussion. Thank you all for watching us.